So back by popular demand, we have another Musket and Tomahawks battle report today. And so today we have a 300-point game of an all-native list versus a French list. I will go over the lists in a moment. My opponent that has the all-native list has taken the raid objective, so he has to destroy and burn these buildings in this village, whereas my French list has the engagement objective, and essentially I have to destroy 2/3 of his force just to prevent him from being effective. And now in my opponent's list, he has a lot of diversity in his list. Before I go to the two sachems, we have this group in the woods here are a regular group of natives. We have the 6 in the middle between the two sachems that are essentially braves. We have this 6 next to them that are veterans. We have two groups here. The one in the front are bloodthirsty, sort of melee-focused natives, and the ones behind are natives with bows instead of guns, but they're otherwise regular natives. Now, as far as the sachems go, they both have the guerrilla trait. This one right here is a special trait called cold-blooded, and the other, and that essentially gives him some bonuses to reactions and those around him. And then this one here had one that was called something like Special Star, and essentially he gets a chance to survive when he should die based on a roll. He'll get like a chance when he's supposed to die to actually survive. Now, the one to the left here is also his main officer that actually has a trait, or I should say a side plot. And his side plot today is called Rancor. He essentially has issues with those natives over there that had the bows. He doesn't like them for some reason, and he kind of is hoping that they're not going to survive this battle. And so if they don't survive this battle, then he will get his side plot. Okay, now to the French side. So the French side is primarily an Indian force that's actually being led by a sachem today. This sachem has been tasked with protecting this village by an important French officer, and we'll go into more about that officer in a moment. These natives here are all of these ones are regular natives, nothing special. We have a group of French artillery that is limbered. We have another 2 groups of natives here. The one that's more towards the top of the screen, where one of them has the white top, they have rifles, but otherwise they're regular natives. We have a sachem behind them, and then in front towards the bottom of the screen here we have another group of natives that are just plain natives, nothing special about them in addition to them. Now, for the actual officer trait, what I had got was stealthy, and so my main native, which officer or sachem right there, has certain benefits to not being spotted. So he's considered to be stealthy. Now, he has the guerrilla trait, as both of my opponent's officers do, or sachems do. The other sachem I have just has a rifle, no other traits. This sachem also has a rifle, and also for the side plot, basically I rolled romance, and so this sachem has taken a fancy to a French noble lady. Whether or not that's reciprocated, I don't really know, but he does actually need to keep her alive in this game. And so, of course, my opponent needs to kill her. Okay, and so I think that covers it, and we will get to round 1. Okay, so we are at the end of round 1, going into round 2. We've had a fairly epic game so far, typical Musket and Tomahawks fashion. Most of the forces of the all Indian force had moved over this way, while forces from the natives that are allied with the French had sort of come up towards that direction. They're now sort of veering over towards this side of the table. Not a lot of casualties taken or given on that side of the table. The artillery piece is really, in the first round, just came up and positioned, limbered, so you essentially have to take an action to limber, then moved it up to where they want to put it, but is not unlimbered yet. The leader for the French sachem, I should say, the civilian is still following behind, but he ran up to the front of this building and is at that door. Now he has a rifle, and then there's another sachem right there with his rifle, and then these are the riflemen natives. Where most of the action really happened, where it was fairly epic, was over here. A lot of the natives have moved over to this side of the table, but we had some altercations. One group of natives on the French side came up here, and we had a melee with the natives with that were bloodthirsty, so they're like better in hand-to-hand combat, but dice rolls just were not really very lucky on the side of the all-native force, and they were essentially given flight, and so 4 of them out of the 6 were killed, while the French Hurons, or the French natives, didn't suffer any casualties at all. Now, as well, we had an attack happen on the natives with bows, and that rendered them into a routing scenario, and they ended up having 5 die as well. No deaths on the Huron side, so really bad luck, or epic, depending on how you define it. As well, we had the group of veterans, and they ended up getting into a firefight over here. And they ended up recoiling and losing 1 model, just with the loss of 1 model. Now, we have the sachem that's still there, standing defiant against what's happening here, and we have another group of natives that have come up, and they're not quite in melee distance. They've just ended just outside melee distance. They ended up doing a guerrilla tactic. The sharpshooters did fire on this group and kill one of them, but they had first gotten out of the way, so only one of their characters was in range to be shot. So they sort of really preserved the integrity of this group by using that guerrilla tactic. And then we have a group that was up over here, moving up to this side. There were actually 2 Huron French groups here at the beginning of the round. One came up in here, and then one ran right in to defend this barn. And these are not fire markers. They're actually, in this case, because they're not on the roof or anything, they're actually just black powder markers from the guys at this door that fired out. So yeah, lots of action in round 1. Pretty typical of Musket and Tomahawks on a 4-foot by 4-foot table. We're playing 300 points today, which is between, we're going on a 4-foot versus a 6-foot table. If we upped it to 4, then it would expand the table. But actually that can be quite fun, because we get into the action right away. So we will come back at the end of round 2 and let you know how it goes. Hey everybody, so we're at the end of round 2. Lots of action, really, in both rounds. The game has been conceded by my opponent at this point. Really, because of due to bad dice rolling on his side, probably the hardest dice situation, most one-sided that I've seen in a long time in a game. My unit, which really did, there's only one of him left down here, he did almost single-handedly take on 3 to 4 units, the unit he was part of in the force, and win, in both shooting and melee, just one after the other. And finally, one of his units did catch them towards the end of the game and just reduce them down to 1 guy. Members in this sort of group here both fired on his unit, and they got into a melee combat where we had one of his units against the windows and the doors and basically fighting through. Now they do get the advantage being in the building on their defense, but they really came out on top on that as well. And then we had the group that was trying to defend this flank of the church here ended up following the direction that the opponent went onto this side of the board. taking firing lines here with the rifles and getting occasional hits, but nothing too dramatic, but getting a little bit. And really, that's kind of where we ended up. He voluntarily, he'd lost, at the point that he lost over 50% of his models and things were really going downhill and he lost a lot of models, he ended up running a couple of his guys just at the end of the turn off the table, really just conceding. We finished out the second turn. And so it does happen sometimes. It's happened on this channel before when we've ended the game in 2 turns. On the 4 foot by 4 foot board, that tends to happen more because you really do actually start fighting in round 1, really halfway into round 1. There's not like that movement 1 or 2 turns that happen in some games. What we'll likely do is come back shortly with another game, either similar lists or I might even just change mine up again. Interesting thing is I really would like to see how the artillery works. This actually ended before the artillery even got a chance to, like I would have ended up placing it this turn, but he had essentially finished by then. So round 2 I would have had my artillery in place, but really the action was already over by the time the horses got up and the crew got the cannon positioned. That's never happened before. Actually, in the last one time I did do artillery, I had it in action. But yeah, so hope you enjoyed, just an experience just to see some of primarily native versus native fighting, and in a shorter game of, I guess that ends up being a bit more one-sided in this case of Musket and Tomahawks. And so we'll come back with another one, and hopefully that one will be a little bit more balanced with the dice rolls and how everything works out. Okay, take care everybody.